I have been all over the world and have directly experienced the gratitude many other countries have for the United States. Elderly women in Poland kissing our hands in 2015, having drinks bought for us in Latvia, an insanely moving tribute to the American soldier in Seoul, South Korea. These are things that we sadly miss as Americans ourselves, as we are often our harshest critics, which is a good thing. We are constantly evaluating ourselves, but sometimes it's worth reminding ourselves that the United States does good as well because other countries recognize that. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video, and probably others going forward to go along with my war updates, my congressional updates, and my foreign policy updates, to remind us Americans what many overseas already know, that in the face of tragedy, America has been, and so long as our flag flies, will always be there to help. And I'm going to start this off with the Marshall Plan. So Europe's economy was devastated by World War II. Industrial and agricultural production had plummeted, infrastructure was obviously severely damaged, and many countries faced significant shortages of food and other essential goods. The Marshall Plan aimed to rebuild war-torn regions, remove trade barriers, modernize industry, improve the prosperity of Europeans throughout the continent. There was a genuine humanitarian concern from the United States for the people of Europe who were suffering from poverty, homelessness, famine, etc. after the war. The Marshall Plan was seen as a way to provide relief and improve living conditions. Now, the U.S. was also concerned about the political instability in Europe, which it feared could lead to a play by the Soviet Union on various European countries. The economic hardships and political instability in the post-war era were seen as fertile grounds for the Soviet Union to spread its influence across Europe. By aiding in economic recovery, the U.S. aimed to foster more democratic governments and counter the appeal of communism and the strength of the Soviet Union in Europe. Furthermore, the U.S. economy itself benefited from a stable and economically strong Europe. Europe was a significant market for American goods, and its recovery was seen as beneficial for the global economy, which includes the United States. The Marshall Plan encouraged cooperation among European nations, which was seen as a way to foster stability and peace in the region. And this cooperation laid the groundwork for what would become the European Union. The Marshall Plan, also officially known as the European Recovery Program, was an American initiative to provide Western Europe with aid, in which the United States gave at the time $12 billion, which in current terms is approximately $160 billion in current dollar value. This was all economic assistance, but there was other assistance provided as well, and I'll talk about that here in a bit. This was all meant to rebuild after World War II. So here's a breakdown of the assistance that was provided by country. To the United Kingdom, approximately $41 billion, and this is all in today's dollars. France, $33 billion, Italy, $19 billion, West Germany, $17 billion. And you have to remember, Italy and West Germany fought against the United States and really the Allied powers in World War II. And West Germany received $17 billion, Netherlands $14 billion, Belgium and Luxembourg combined received $7 billion, Austria $8 billion, Greece $9 billion, Denmark $3 billion, Norway $3 billion, Turkey $3 billion, Ireland $2 billion, Sweden $2 billion, Portugal about $1 billion, and Iceland about $500 million. Outside of this financial benefit, the U.S. actually reached out to the Soviet Union as well to provide funding and to provide aid and to provide different sources of connection with the United States, and the Soviet Union unfortunately completely turned it down, instead tried to create their own aid package within its own sphere of influence to counter what they saw as U.S. influence on Europe through these aid packages. But the U.S. also sent non-monetary things that weren't included in these numbers. That included advisors to assist Europeans in rebuilding efforts. This included agricultural specialists, architects, engineers, business professionals, construction workers, all who could help modernize, rebuild, and grow European industries and agriculture. Additionally, the U.S. provided essential supplies and equipment, including food, machinery, and raw materials at no cost. These were not a part of the established money that we were giving them that I just talked about. These resources were just resources to rebuild the infrastructure and resume production in a non-wartime effort. The U.S. established various exchange programs to foster cultural and educational ties. This includes things like the Fulbright Scholarship, which allowed Europeans to study in the U.S. and vice versa, promoting mutual understanding and sharing knowledge and skills and culture, etc. The U.S. encouraged political and economic cooperation among European countries, and they facilitated it through the use of Marshall Plan aid, but also helped with the encouraging other countries to have favorable trade policies with Europe given what had just taken place. In addition, they also laid the groundwork through these trade policies, through these economic and political cooperations within European countries for, again, the European Union as we see it. The U.S. itself adjusted trade policies so that it could have favorable trade with Europe, so that Europe could have cheaper trade, so that they could get online faster. And then it reduced trade barriers. And the U.S. went to other countries and encouraged them to do the same, which stimulated the economy for growth in Europe. And I just want to emphasize that after World War II, where America sacrificed hundreds of thousands of soldiers and sailors, airmen, Marines, etc. on the battlefield, not just in Europe, but also in the Pacific, the U.S., who was largely economically untouched by the war, stood up and said, we're going to help Europe, help them rebuild. And I firmly believe that much of where Europe is now as an economic power through the European Union stands on the shoulders of the decisions made of those who enacted the Marshall Plan from the United States.